Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 138. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. A happy Memorial Day to everyone out there. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good on this Memorial Day. Hope you are as well. Hope you had a great weekend. You got any eating plans for today, or you just kind of laying low?
I think I'm going to go out with some friends at a park and hang out for a little bit. So, yeah, that'll be good. And see what happens with the Steelers. Maybe we get some news today. Maybe we don't. We have OTAs on the horizon. So, it may be a quiet Monday for the Steelers, but they're going to get back at it on Tuesday, Dave.
Yeah, I guess this is kind of the first, proverbial line in the sand where it comes with when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, and we'll see if anything happens over the course of the next, let's say, 24 hours to see. Look, they only have 6 OTA practices this year, down from 10, and as we've said several times, ideally you'd love to have new quarterback to the roster there taking part in all this. We'll go over a few things that Aaron Rodgers said recently at a concert, and all signs, if he's going to sign anywhere, all signs still point toward the Steelers as being the place that he lands. I have a feeling it's going to happen. I don't know, later rather than sooner. What's the proper terminology on it at this point? I'm really kind of tired of talking about it, but it will be interesting to see what happens over the course of the next 24 hours, because indeed the Steelers will have their first OTA practice on Tuesday.
Aaron Rodgers made some comments that surfaced over the weekend we will talk about, but let's not lead with that because, like you said, it has become a tiresome subject and there is no hard news on Aaron Rodgers. The wait continues as of Monday, May 26th. Let's talk about the rest of the actual Pittsburgh Steelers on the roster currently for OTAs this week. The whole practice is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They are voluntary in nature, but are generally well attended. Even sometimes maybe some veterans and star players will show up for some practices, not all, but very few players will skip entirely, if any, of these OTAs upcoming. Dave, what are some things to look for? I know we're not there. It's in shorts and they're not in pads, so it's still very much the beginning stages of the team getting together. But what are some things that you're watching for and hoping to hear about over these next 2 weeks?
I want reports on the healthy players out there without restrictions. Some that were obviously injured last year. I think it starts with Troy Fautanu. Sounds like he should be good to go and ready to go at right tackle, with Broderick Jones shifting over to left tackle. So I want to hear that Troy Fautanu was there all 3 days and without limitations. The same goes for Roman Wilson, who missed obviously a lot of time during his rookie season with his ailment. So those are 2 obviously former draft picks that you want to hear good things about, especially just being out there with no limitations. Cole Holcomb is another one that obviously never got on the field for the team last year. He was able to resume practicing late last season. Assuming the team was able to win their wild card game last year, it sounds like he would have been in a position to maybe to get activated to the 53. So just general overall health of the team, when it comes to players that were injured last year, we don't know who or what or when, as far as any. There weren't really any rumblings of any off-season surgeries, but that doesn't mean that maybe 1 or 2 didn't happen. But I think that's first and foremost, and it starts with those younger guys on the team that I mentioned with Fautanu and Roman Wilson. Just hopefully they're out there participating and all of them without limitations.
I agree. And Fautanu's the big name to watch because he's the one guy who never came back last year, even in a practice capacity. Wilson returned to practice, Holcomb returned to practice. So I imagine they're practicing basically fully for an OTA session now, several months removed from when they were designated to return and had that window open late in the Steelers season. Fautanu was the one who did with a dislocated kneecap. Hopefully, he can do something. I imagine he would. If it was just a dislocated kneecap, that timetable for rehab recovery is about 3 months. Injury happened in September, should put him, easily able to participate at some level, but that is a box to check. And I don't think there was anybody else who ended the year truly injured in the sense of they did not return in a capacity. Ryan Watts was one of those guys, but he has medically retired. Was there anybody else who's returning in 25 that ended the year in 24 injured?
I can't remember. It doesn't sound like that. Obviously we mentioned about Holcomb was back practicing again, and I think that was about the gist of it, wasn't as far as IR guys go and all. They pretty much had all up back at least with their windows open, I think.
Right. CJ Henderson didn't finish, but he's not on the team anymore. Ryan Watts, as we said, he's no longer on the roster. So it really is Fautanu. But to your point, are there any guys who had the offseason surgery, and I'm sure somebody did, that may limit them at the start of OTAs? It might be a little bit harder to hear about those names. They don't always get reported as easily as Fautanu's back at practice or he's not practicing. But I imagine there's somebody that's taking it easy this spring.
All right, and then an easy one to circle that we kind of see the elephant in the room, and it's a black and white kind of thing. Will Aaron Rodgers be there, or won't Aaron Rodgers be there? That's that's it. That's the end of the discussion right there, as far as the thing to look for. Either he's there or he's not.
Right. And there's really no other additional commentary to make from that kind of narrow scope. But if he's not, and we'll assume he's not because there has been no word that he has signed, then it's Mason Rudolph as quarterback one. And he'll get peppered with questions about his status and future. I'm sure we'll answer them well and toe the line well. He's already had one podcast interview where was obviously asked a million different Rodgers in standing, are you the starter? How are you handling things type of questions? And he answered it with the professionalism you would expect. But I'm curious to hear, how the players talk about who this team's starting quarterback will be. Will they throw support behind Mason Rudolph? Will they leave it more up in the air and say that's above our pay grade, and whoever the team decides, we're gonna rally and support? That's basically what Alex Highsmith said on NFL Network last week. So it's less about Rodgers itself, but how the team reacts to Rodgers not being there, Rudolph being the guy, and kind of, this Rudolph coalesce some set of support from the veterans, the old guard, the Watts, the Minkas, the Haywards, etc. Of maybe this should be the guy.
Yep. I imagine a lot of the verbiage will be a lot along the lines of what Alex Highsmith just had on the Insider's appearance that he had a few days ago there, where, oh yeah, we firmly trust and have confidence in Mason Rudolph, but in the same breath, we will welcome Aaron Rodgers with open arms.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'm sure that's basically how every player will sum things up, and it's the right thing to say. The only thing they really can say, and it's one reason why I think Rodgers should be in Pittsburgh on Tuesday, even though it is voluntary practices and they're not maybe necessary for a 41-year-old veteran quarterback, but for a guy that's never played in an Arthur Smith system and has never played for the Steelers. Not like he's some grizzled veteran returning for his 10th year in Pittsburgh. He should be there and shouldn't force everyone else to have to answer questions on his behalf. What if Rudolph, and I imagine it's realistic and reasonable to think that Rudolph does well in OTAs. They're obviously low-key practices. They're tailored for the offense. There's no contact. There's no hitting. I imagine Rudolph will look just fine. Would players, do you think, after 2 weeks of OTAs, if Rodgers does not show up, would they start to sit there and say, you know what, Mason looks pretty good. He's here. He's working. Maybe we don't want Aaron Rodgers to be a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Well, even if they do think it, the verbiage will never come out of their mouth, I wouldn't think.
No one will say that explicitly, but do you think that's a possibility just in the feel of the locker room? And, if so, should the team listen to that? If there is a feel of the locker room, if the leaders are believing that, hey, Mason's looking good, we think he should be the guy.
Well, I would like to think that the grizzled veterans on the team know that football in shorts in the month of May and June is a lot different than lining up 11 guys on a Sunday once the regular season. So yeah, you should. The biggest concern is if your quarterback looks bad during
Fair.
during this time. That's when I think more realistic discussions could happen. I find it hard to believe that some of these grizzled veterans say, "Man, Mason just blew it up in the first 3 practices of OTAs. Maybe we don't. Hey Omar, hey Mike, do we really need Aaron Rodgers?"
Sure, but they also have seen Rudolph in stadiums before in 2023 when Hayward was there, Watt was there, Minka was there. The leaders were still around when Rudolph turned around that terrible 3-game losing streak when Pittsburgh fell to 7-7, won the final 3, got into the postseason for the wild card game. So it wouldn't just be just about that, but it'd be one component of it. And also to the broader point of, hey, this is the guy who's here. This is the guy who's working. We want to work with the guys who want to work with us right now. And that guy is Mason Rudolph.
Right. But they'll once again, I don't think we'll get any quotes along that line other than we're happy to have Mason here and we trust him.
Of course, yeah. I don't think this will be an external thing, but could there be an internal feeling of Rudolph spinning the ball well? He's running the offense. Arthur Smith is happy with him. It's just going to become more of a point the longer this thing goes on for. And that's just kind of the overall point I'm making. The longer that Rodgers waits, if he doesn't show up for any spring and offseason activity, the more I think support Rudolph will gain in that locker room, releasing the players. Does that change Pittsburgh's calculation? Does that make Omar Khan not pursue Aaron Rodgers? Probably not. But it is, I think, one aspect to think about when you go through OTAs and minicamp next month.
Okay, fair enough. I think another thing to look forward to, even though it is voluntary in nature here, is will TJ Watt be around for any of these, not only these first 3, but the first 6, or the only 6 OTA practices? Will he, at least show up and, go through some drills or whatnot, or because of his contract situation, just because he's a grizzled veteran and might feel that his work is better served in Wisconsin in his own personal gym. It's something that people will talk about it if he's not there. We won't be talking about it if he is there so much.
Right. And it's really the one guy to look at contractually now that George Pickens has been traded, where you just sit there and wonder what the approach is going to be. I imagine if he does appear, he's not going to really work. It's going to be just more of a, put a face to it and just show that he's there. But I don't think he'll do much on the field given the contract situation. But there's a pretty good chance he won't be there at all. And I think for a guy like him, if he just shows up once, that's probably enough to sit there and say that, he's, not super unhappy with his contract situation. If he misses the entire 6 OTA practices, that'll be interesting.
What about Chris Boswell? I have been on record as saying I'm not kicking a ball this summer until I get more cash in 2025.
Well, agreed, but Boswell, I think, will be there because he's a kicker and probably just won't do much of anything. If these OTAs run like training camps, there's only certain days where you kick to begin with. You're not kicking every day, even in training camp, and so that's probably it's a valid point. And I don't think if you're Boswell's agent, you advise him to do much of anything, but you probably at least just show up.
All right, if I show up, I'm not kicking the football.
Yeah, like I said, you just show up, and they have Ben Sauls as the other kicker, and so Sauls can handle those off-season duties.
And wouldn't you rather take a longer look at Ben Sauls during this anyway?
Well, and even just that, Boswell is how old now? 33, 34? I mean, you want to save that leg. Not that you have to do everything and make everything about prevention here in May, but it's not like you're really urgent to get Boswell reps this time of year, and it's probably better for him to rest because he did a lot of kicking in 2024.
Yeah, but what if Chris Boswell's not there? You ask me things that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Is it are you guaranteeing that Chris Boswell will be there?
I'm not going to. No, I'm not going. I'm not going to guarantee that. Certainly, I'm not going to guarantee about the status of any player because you never know what's happening in a personal life. There's kind of even though they're voluntary, there's still kind of excused absences sometimes of, hey, coach, I got this thing going on, I can't make it. But I mean, I think he'll be there in some capacity, and that's probably the extent of my expectation on Chris Boswell. We'll see a photo of him, and that's good enough for me.
All right. And as you mentioned, as far as other contract related guys, veterans that could potentially skip, I think that's it. That's the list.
Is there any chance? Well, this is probably a bad way to even think about the question, but I think about Pat Fryermuth, Najee Harris. Those guys did everything last offseason, last training camp. Is that going to change the guard of how future young players handle things because they saw guys like Fryermuth and Harris work and didn't sit out anything?
I think it was commendable how both those guys went about their business.
You saw one guy get rewarded for it in Fryermuth
Mhm.
and one guy who did not in Najee Harris.
Right. I mean, I don't know what the overall question here is.
Yeah, I'm not really angling a good question, just kind of a thought that I had. So we'll speed past that. We know the situation contractually. It's Watt. We'll check on Boswell as well, but those are really the two guys to look at here. Now that Pickens is in Dallas. Some other things to watch for, Dave, of course, with Pickens in Dallas. Wide receiver too. Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin. Who else might emerge? Robert Woods, his first work in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform in practice. So a lot of discussion, debate about that. Who's going to step up to replace Pickens opposite DK Metcalf? And this is the first chance for Pittsburgh to begin evaluating and answering that question.
Yeah, and I hope the takeaway is A, Metcalf is there. B, the glowing reports of what a what a specimen he is in up close and personable. I mean personal, and how just doing things that you would expect a guy like DK Metcalf to do during as much as you can do in shorts and helmets.
Yeah, I'm sure Metcalf will be there. He better be there. He just paid him $150 million. I assume he'll be attending, and I'm sure he'll look good. I mean, that's kind of, to me, just some box checking on that, but it is about, okay, Roman Wilson in year two. Does anything look different? He's a guy that should do well in these padless practices. He's athletic. He's twitchy. He's fast. He looked good in training camp in the padless sessions before getting hurt in that first padded practice last year. You're not going to sit there and say, well, Roman Wilson had a great couple of days of OTAs, problem solved, but you'd rather have him look good than be quiet overall to start. Calvin Austin, contract year for him. Robert Woods, the first time in the system. Anybody else who might emerge, the undrafted rookie free agents. You've talked about Rock Taylor quite a bit. They got Keyshawn Williams from Indiana. I even wrote about Lance McCutcheon, who's a futures contract guy that he played with the Rams in 2022. He had some buzz that summer, and so he's a guy that has played on Sundays. He's fairly experienced overall. This will be his fourth NFL season. So could one of those guys make some noise too?
Yeah, and I think just in general, as we do every year, you're hoping to get great reports out of your rookie class, and as you stated, which of the undrafted free agents you'll really start to. And once again, I use the word impressed. Well, we really know how impressive they really are. Media reports and Mike Tomlin will tamp down everything as being, look, this is just a more of an extended part of for the rookies, a rookie mini camp of how they receive and disseminate information and start putting it what they learn in the classroom into action on the field and all like that. But obviously, you hope to hear so and so made a great catch. So and so looks great in shorts and and a helmet and those kind of things that just obviously come along with every with rookie classes every offseason at this time.
Sure, you don't want to make too much out of these sessions, but for first year players, for rookies, for new Steelers, it's probably more notable. You want to get a good lay of the land of what these guys could potentially offer. And I always go back to think about Mike Hilton, and the first time he really gained some buzz was the spring of that first full season with Pittsburgh. He had gotten signed on the practice squad midway through the year prior. I forget exactly what year that was. And I think it was Ramon Foster that went, who's this number 40? That was back when Hilton wore number 40, making some plays in the spring. And that translated, it carried over, and the rest is history there. So it's always good to at least put an ear to maybe who's making some plays early. Because if you're not making plays now, probably won't make plays when the pads come on.
Hopefully, we're not talking about wasted reps, balls on the grounds, center quarterback exchanges, false starts, those kind of things. There, you want to maximize the amount of time that you get during these 6 practices, and every rep that's ruined by a bad, exchange or anything, false start. You want to have those minimized as much as possible this time of year.
Yeah, you want to piss off the coaching staff, go make a mental mistake, go run the wrong route, go not know your assignment, go false start, go have a exchange issue like you said. It's wasted opportunities. You learn nothing, you gain nothing from it. And so those things have to get cleaned up. They're going to happen. They're going to happen in OTAs. They're going to happen in mandatory minicamp. They're going to happen in training camp, but you need to limit those things, improve upon those. And for an offensive line that is young, but there are no rookie starters. It's not like last year we had a bunch of, young first year guys, Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick. You got Broderick Jones now in year 3. So these guys have to coalesce, have to improve. And I've talked about the O-line is the position group to watch this year. The definition of success for me in 2025 is getting this offensive line to reach its potential or start really moving close to it, where Jones turns things around and Fautanu looks like the player that Pittsburgh believes he can be and will be a really good offensive tackle, and McCormick in his second year. It's going to be hard to really judge those things in OTAs, obviously, but that's what you want to start moving towards. I think for Broderick Jones in particular, I want to hear his commentary about playing left tackle. Does he feel like it's going to be something that really unlocks his game and gets him to be the first round pick he was drafted to be? I think whenever you're a right tackle and Dan Moore's on the other side, last year you're asked, do you like playing left tackle, right tackle? You're probably a little more politically correct about it than Jones kind of was, although he did once say he liked playing left tackle. I think now that you're at left tackle and you're entrenched there, you can sit there and say, oh, thank God I'm back at left tackle. I really wanted to play left tackle. So I want to hear, hopefully, Broderick Jones, his thoughts on making that move back to left tackle.
Yeah, and as far as schematics actually go during these next 6 practices, I think it's easier to point to the defensive side. Well, what's the nickel rotation look like? Darius Slay indeed going to be opposite Joey Porter? Can anybody kind of push Beanie Bishop for a slot job? And look, on a defensive line, Waya Black was asked, was basically said there's been no real talk about kind of nose tackle versus defensive end and what that might look in sub pack. Will we get a more definitive on Waya Black and maybe where he's lining up mostly during these 6 practices? And then once again, what's sub package starting to look like coming out of the spring?
Agreed. I mean, I imagine Beanie Bishop's taking first reps at slot corner to begin the spring. Who else do you think could be involved in getting some work there? Eccles, Kent, anybody else to look for?
I mean, I think Eccles, obviously. Who else?
Castro, would he get some work in the slot?
Yeah,
potentially?
I suppose some second or third team type stuff and all like that. Yeah, just curious to kind of see how the reporting coincides with just schematics overall, and how much of that will we be able to rubber stamp and expect to translate over into mandatory minicamp and then obviously training camp at the end of July once it gets underway.
See if Deshaun Jameson, who signed a reserve future contract, gets some work in the slot as well. Do you think, how much of a lock is Bishop to be this team's starting slot corner, or do you view as a competition as open?
I think it's going to be a competition that's open. I would expect him to be the carryover. They really want to see if he's the man for the job, though. So I would expect him to roll out there first.
Right. No disagreement on him being first, but even not for OTAs, but just come week 1. Like, let me put it this way: put a percentage odds of Beanie Bishop being this team's week 1 slot corner for that first nickel snap against the Jets.
68%.
Very specific. I'll take it. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable number. I might go a little bit higher, 75%, but we're splitting hairs. So good odds for Beanie Bishop.
Yeah. You just want to see him build and have a better understanding of the defense and his role within it, and knowing where the other people on the field are supposed to be, and you just expect him to make that next step in his progress as a second year player. And I imagine Mike Tomlin will be asked about second year players and expected development, especially the guys that missed a lot of time, like the Fautanos and the Roman Wilsons. But within the same breath, you've got second year players who played a lot in the rookie season, such as Beanie Bishop.
Really does feel like a rookie and a half class coming back to Pittsburgh, because as you said, a lot of rookies barely played or didn't play their rookie season, whether that was Roman Wilson, 5 offensive snaps, Tanu, 1 start, Logan Lee missed the entire year, Ryan Watts as well, but he's no longer a factor. So you get those 3 guys back from your rookie class who really were unable to contribute in 2024. With Bishop, I just want to figure out, what does he do well? And it's not supposed to be a scathing question on Beanie Bishop, but I think last year was mostly about surviving because he just got thrown into the fire. Like there was no other option at nickel. He was the guy. He was healthy. He took the reps. They rolled him out there until Cam Sutton came off suspension. And is he a great run defender? Haven't gotten that sense. Is he great in coverage? Haven't gotten that sense either. He made some plays though, 4 interceptions, 2 picks off Aaron Rodgers. He was opportunistic. There were some good reads in zone coverage underneath. But I still want to figure out exactly what is his best skill set. What does he offer? I haven't quite figured that out, but I know last year was just like keeping your head above water. And to his credit, I thought he did. There was communication problems. And so a lot of things to work on, a big jump you hope he can make. But I just want to learn more about, what are his true strengths for this defense?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe Beanie Bishop's rookie season is he did survive. He was thrown into the pool. He swam, kept his head above water for the most part. And I think the big takeaway there with him is he did make big plays in big moments.
Yeah, there was the 2 picks against the Jets. There was the Giants game to finish that one off, I believe, if I'm remembering things correctly. What was the other interception?
Aaron Rodgers, he had.
No, I know. The 2 against Rodgers, the Giants game, he had 4, right? What was the other interception? Is it the Raiders game?
Drawing a blank
No, because the Rodgers game was his first interceptions, I believe.
I'm drawing a blank when the other one was.
Let's go use the power of the internet and get an answer. He had 2 against the Jets. That was the Bengals game in the Week 18 finale. That was off the Patrick Queen tip pass that Bishop, I think, dove out for?
I'm having problems recalling it.
All right. Well, those were the 4 interceptions there. So big time playmaking for sure from a number perspective. But I think there's still certainly a lot more to examine, explore, and evaluate with Beanie Bishop.
Absolutely.
Because he barely played the second half of the season. Once Sutton came back, Bishop was playing in dime. And that's when Pittsburgh used dime, which sometimes was infrequently against the Chiefs on Christmas Day. He didn't have a single defensive snap. And so he got a lot of snaps early, a little snaps late.
All right.
What else, Dave? What else to watch for? As you said, defensive line with Y.A. Black. Is he going to be the backup nose tackle? You mentioned that a moment ago. I know that Dunbar talked about he's more 4-eye, but that was before Pittsburgh released Montrevious Adams. And so with Adams out of the mix now, if it's not Black at nose tackle, then who that's going to be the backup nose tackle? Is it going to be Logan Lee, who assumed those snaps when Fehoko got hurt, 3rd team last year? Is it going to be Dominique Davis? Will it be somebody else? So be watching for that.
I just pulled up the play. Yeah, that was the one that went through with Beanie Bishop against the Bengals. Went through Patrick Queen's arms, bounced up, and Beanie made a nice play before the ball hit the ground.
Okay, gotcha. So, yeah, got that one all squared away. But yeah, defensive line, the rotation there. What is Derek Carman? Is he getting first team works at left defensive end? Are they going to make him earn it, as Pittsburgh often does? Will Aquale get the looks there? Who's getting other rotational work? Loudermilk, Lee, Otomewa, etc.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see the inside linebacker rotation. No Landon Roberts now. You got Cole Holcomb missed last season. You still obviously have Patrick Queen in there, who's getting the majority of the reps in base alongside Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I thought our Joe C wrote a really good article this week, and I'm in full agreement. I think Peyton Wilson could be a breakout player in year number 2. I think with his work ethic, his natural talent, the plays that he made, I think if he cleans up his run defense a little bit, gets better with his block shedding, block deconstruction, makes up for that lack of length a little bit, he could really have a big year. I think the goal for Pittsburgh ideally is that it becomes a 2-man show. I know Pittsburgh has enjoyed a rotation of a 3-man rotation with Roberts last year and Wilson and Queen. But I think ideally talent wins out. It becomes the Queen and Peyton Wilson show. And so if Wilson can really take those strides, Pittsburgh will be better off for it. If not, then you'll see Malik Harrison play on early downs the way that Roberts did the past 2 years.
Yeah, and how does Malik Harrison fit into all this? Now, obviously we consider him an inside linebacker at this point. I mean, the Steelers drafted Jack Sawyer. They've got the three other outside linebackers to play, obviously ahead of him, and that even further, makes the point that Malik's going to be an inside guy. So how does he figure into all this moving forward?
Right. I mean, I think it's an early down role, if anything. If Wilson does not take that step, and I'm sure you'll see Harrison when he plays in preseason action, kind of working in those groupings. But ideally Wilson becomes the base guy and a nickel guy, and cleans your 3-down play, your green dot linebacker. If Wilson does make that jump, then Harrison becomes a quality backup and special teamer, because we've talked about his great special teams background that he had in Baltimore when he signed, and he's a 4-5 phase kind of a guy, 1,500 career special team snaps, and so I think that's ideal for him, because I didn't love the tape of him playing inside linebacker last year.
How much does Mark Robinson become an afterthought here as we start the spring practices and all? Once again, you got Holcomb coming back from injury. You got Malik Harrison new in that room. You got Peyton Wilson's second year in the system. Obviously, you have Patrick Queen. Is Mark Robinson the guy? Oh, you better get him in there for some third team snaps so we can give him some snaps.
I don't want to say he's an afterthought, but he's fighting for his job. When Carson Bruner gets added, to me, that's likely a 2 dogs, 1 bone situation. It partially depends on Cole Holcomb, because he is an unknown. I mean, he'll be practicing, I assume, but what does he look like? It's probably better to answer that when the pads come on, because he did at least practice a little bit last year. But I mean, he is just a complete unknown. He has not played a game since that terrible knee injury in November of 2023. But if he does make the team, then it becomes 2-horse race between the rookie and Bruner and Robinson.
All right, how's the safety depth gonna shake out heading into after these first 6 practices? Obviously, you've got Minkah Fitzpatrick, you got Deshaun Elliott. What happens beyond that?
I think it's pretty settled. I would guess Juan Thornhill, your number 3, Miles Killebrew, your number 4, special teams captain. We'll see what that 5th spot entails. If they keep a 5th safety, I'm not even sure who would frankly be great in the mix right now for that, with Watts retired, but your top 4 are pretty established.
Yeah, I mean, can Castro do enough to warrant, because of maybe some of his slot versatility, and just one other aspect to kind of look forward to.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I think Castro can certainly be that number 5. That probably as good a bet as any. Let's go now to offense. Tight end could be interesting. Dave would be a little less so at the top, with Freiermuth in Washington established, but you have J.J. Galbraith, the undrafted rookie free agent, a really athletic receiver-like type of tight end, which I thought was a really good get for Pittsburgh post-draft. And don't forget about Darnell Parham, who's 6'8", athletic, can run the seam, and that's a guy that probably will look good in a pads practice. He better.
Yeah. The thing about it, though, is we'll learn more about these tight ends once the thumping starts, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, we'll learn about all these guys more when the pads come on, when it really becomes football and not just football light. But, I think a guy like Parham wouldn't surprise me if some beat guys tweeting about, man, Parham just made this great play skying over this dude in a 7-on-7 session, because he's got the skill set to win in an environment like this.
All right.
And then running back, let's talk running back, Caleb Johnson. What are you hoping to hear out of Caleb Johnson in his first full team practice? He was at rookie minicamp, but now he's with the veterans as well.
Just that he's picking up. He's feeling comfortable in the things that Arthur Smith likes to run. Will we? I don't know how much we'll get out of outside, inside, schematics zone. As far as the scheme goes and all like that. Just want it to come out that he feels comfortable. He's not not making mental errors. Look, I think one of the big points that's got me bullish on him is that a lot of, he was asked to run so many different, running schemes there at Iowa, and you would think that that's going to translate well to some of the things that Arthur Smith wants to run. Kind of, he's used to running with the heavier formations and those kind of things. And once again, they're not going to be tackling or anything going on there. But he obviously during some of these offensive drills and all like that, just making sure that he's identifying things right as to guys that he would be asked to pick up in pass protection. Once again, I'll have an article coming out here this next week about his actual pass blocking snaps in this 2024 season at Iowa there. We won't learn more about the physical aspect and the ability of the pass blocking until we really get into training camp and we get those backs on backers drills and all like that. But just want to hear that he looks comfortable in his surroundings and what he's going to be asked to do as far as running the football in the various schemes.
It's always hard to get any sort of feel for a running back in a practice situation like this. So the thing I want to hear about is him as a receiver. He didn't catch the ball a ton at Iowa. I think 25 career receptions, I want to say. I think he had 23 last year for the Hawkeyes. It's hard to really evaluate pass protection. It's hard to meaningfully evaluate his ability as a runner, but maybe we hear something as a receiver. Maybe he makes a catch in one-on-ones or, I don't know. Maybe there's a design. They throw one of the Dave Bryan favorite wheel routes to him one of those times just to see what he can do. So how are his hands? That'll be another component of how much third down work he can get.
Yep. No balls on the ground.
And speaking of which, Jaylen Warren, big, not a big spring for Jaylen Warren. It's old hat to him at this point, but a big year for Jaylen Warren, potential number one running back. I assume he'll be the number one starter for these practices and throughout training camp and probably for week one. Contract year for Jaylen Warren. It's a guy that has everything in front of him.
All right, absolutely. 5 million reasons to something to play for this year for sure.
At what point does Cordell Patterson's status on the roster go from, well, he's cheap, they're just keeping him because why not, to, hey, this guy still might make this team?
I mean, he's still on the team right now, so until he's not, he's got a chance. But at some point, hopefully people, at this point, you might as well keep him until at least the start of training camp.
I think you at least keep him through the spring to evaluate these new running backs, Kenneth Gainwell, Caleb Johnson, and A, make sure everyone gets healthy, and B, look at these new faces. Can I make the unpopular argument for Cordell Patterson? Can I do that for a second, Dave?
Have at it.
I'm sure people will love this, and I'm not saying I truly believe this, but Patterson looked pretty good before turning his ankle last year. Remember, he missed a month with that ankle sprain against the Colts, and if you think back to that game,
the Colts
Patterson
game.
Yeah, he was running hot. And I remember on Twitter, my whole timeline was, forget about Najee, put Patterson in. Patterson can run the ball. Harris can't. And then, by season's end, it was Patterson sucks. Get rid of him. Why did they sign him? Terrible move. Both things probably true in a small moment in that particular moment in time. But, how much you have to wonder and try to offer some grace that ankle injury probably never fully healed, even though he missed a month of action, and he did not look like the same guy when he came back from it.
Well, here's the thing. Outside of that preseason run that he had, even before the ankle injury and before the several runs against the Colts, there were a lot of plays where it looked like he was running in concrete shoes.
Before the ankle injury?
Yeah.
I don't think so. The Chargers game he ran well. The Colts game, when did he look like he was running in concrete?
To me, there were some runs where it just felt like he was running in concrete shoes, and that's why I think so many people were surprised at the several good carries that he had against the Colts.
Well, he did miss some of the spring with an injury. He missed the start of training camp with an injury, and so I think there was a conditioning factor with him. But I'm just looking at, there were some plays that were, didn't go for anything, but the Chargers, 4 carries for 33 yards. The Colts game, 6 carries for 43 yards. He was averaging over 7 yards per carry in both those contests. So on limited sample sizes, but I don't know. There were some impressive reps.
Even in the kickoff returns too.
Yeah, but that was all post because he didn't have a single kick return until after his injury. He didn't return a kick until November because at the beginning of the year, teams would just booting out of the end zone because the weather was good.
Well, that's
And
why I
then
said both before and after,
well, yeah, after he was, he plotted. I mean, he was terrible. Although he did have that nice touchdown catch against Baltimore. That was against Malik Harrison too. That great. It was one of the plays of the season, to be honest with you. But I mean, as a runner, he was abysmal, and it was just, it was a mess. But could you attribute that to him missing that time and maybe not fully healing from that ankle injury?
It's possible.
So maybe they just want to see how he looks this year, healthy and good to go. But he's 34. Obviously, his time in the NFL is dwindling. They add Johnson, they add Gainwell. They're going to keep 3 backs. It's hard to see where Patterson fits, but I just wanted to at least make that point because there were some impressive moments for him before getting hurt.
Well, once again, I think when it comes to him, you've kept him up until this point. So you obviously want to see how the health shakes out. It's not killing you financially right now, but I do think you need to take a hard look at it before training camp gets underway, especially with his age and all like that. If you stay healthy at the position, do you really want, even though it's not a high financial risk for him to go to training camp and get injured and subsequently end up on IR. I don't know for sure whether or not he's got a split in his contract or not. I don't think he does as far as the split salary goes. But look, if it looks almost like a foregone conclusion that he's not going to make the roster, do you really want to take him to training camp?
Sure, I get that. And you better be in shape for the spring because wasn't it last spring he said, like, I'm a 2 out of 10 in terms of being in shape and cannot be a 2 out of 10 this time around. And I hope Pittsburgh, no offensive coach better say, well, don't forget about Cordero Patterson and our receiver mix. He's a receiver. Fire him into a cannon. If they say that, that's what they did last year when they would carry 4 receivers on game day. And they would say, well, Patterson's our number 5 and he had a couple catches against the Chargers, but yeah, should not be in that receiver mix, but they probably do like that, at least baseline versatility as a receiver, runner, and returner.
Look, he's always been a guy. Don't count him out. The guy when you least expect it, he's a guy that you can obviously throw in there at the running back position. He can make catches for you. Obviously, his kick return resume over the years speaks for itself. Just when you think you have him counted out, you don't make it this long in the NFL for nothing, right?
True, absolutely. What else at running back? Kenneth Gainwell should look good in these sessions. This is an environment built for a kind of small, shifty guy like him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just getting familiar with the offense, and once again, you're not going to learn a whole hell of a lot about these running backs during these 6 practices and mandatory minicamp, but just got to look comfortable, look like you belong there.
What do you think Gainwell's role is going to be in 2025?
Just occasional usage while they bring. It all depends on third down. I think mostly passing downs. Utilize that explosiveness out of the backfield. I wouldn't imagine he's going to be a heavy first and second down type runner. He might be, and as they bring Caleb Johnson along, might occasionally get a first or second down carry, but I'm not expecting a high snap total out of him, even at the start of the season.
Agreed. Is he going to be the third down back, or do you think Jaylen Warren still assumes those duties?
Man, I've just looked briefly at Gainwell's pass protection, and he's willing and all, but I mean, obviously Jaylen Warren's your best pass protector, known commodity right now. So it's hard to imagine you go away from that.
The incentive to go away from that is if Warren is getting more of the early down work, then maybe you spread out the reps a little bit more, take a little bit off of Warren's plate. But yeah, I mean, I think Gainwell's a little more insurance where Warren has to be the early down guy more than Pittsburgh anticipated. Say, knock on wood, Caleb Johnson gets hurt, or if Warren himself gets injured, then Gainwell can really assume those responsibilities and handle that role that Warren has held throughout most of his Steelers career. And there'll be some, I don't want to say package plays for Gainwell, but there's going to be some utilization of Gainwell's versatility to flex him out and be part of that rotation that Arthur Smith typically has an affinity for rotating in multiple running backs.
get the ball out to him because he can make people miss out in space. We saw it against the Steelers, right? That's
That's why they signed him.
that's why they signed him. He made plays against them. So, but with that said, barring injury, I'm not expecting heavy usage of Gainwell, even at the start of the season.
And then what else at running back? There's Evan Hull. There is Jonathan Ward. Aaron Shamklin has been released. I don't know if we mentioned that last week. That was part of the post-rookie minicamp roster shuffling. And then Max Hurlman, who wore a bunch of hats apparently at rookie minicamp, but listed as a running back, began his college career as a running back at Colgate.
Yeah.
And then quarterback. Let's finish up there at quarterback. Also, I want to see DJ Thomas Jones at fullback. Just can he catch? Blocking is going to be hard to evaluate, but that's another undrafted free agent that I'm taking a liking to. At quarterback, talking about Rudolph, you have on roster right now Will Howard, Skylar Thompson. What do you want to see out of those two guys?
Oh, yeah. Look, we don't know exactly how deep they'll go into, 11 on 11 stuff and all like that. Once again, I just think you want to hear the positive, comfortable aspect of him. We're going to talk a little bit about under center work and all like that, and how much Howard had in college and all like that. But you just hope that he's got a full grasp of the playbook. He's able to disseminate the information out there, get people lined up in the right areas, and just kind of the standard stuff that you'd kind of ask out of a rookie quarterback going through his first OTAs.
This is going to be a loaded question, Dave, so fair warning. Mason Rudolph, number one quarterback in OTAs. Who takes the first, second string rep between Howard and Thompson?
They probably give it to Skylar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't be shocked if you're hearing that based on the veteran status. Thompson has technically been with the team for a couple months longer than Will Howard. He was signed in January. Howard drafted in April. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Thompson was getting the initial nod.
Yeah, and as soon as
people will freak out.
Yeah, people will indeed freak out. What are you doing? But I just think that's a tip of the hat to a guy that's been around and make the rookie earn it.
I'll ask another loaded question to kind of go back to our conversation last week. You believe Howard is almost no way that Thompson beats him out. You really think Howard is just essentially locked into making the 53?
I'll be shocked if Howard doesn't make the 53.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, for Howard, he had rookie minicamp, and so that was good for him to kind of get his feet wet. But now you're with the veterans. Can you still run the huddle when you're going to be third team? You're not going to be the guy, obviously, but when you're in that huddle, you're the guy. You're running the show, and so handling that is going to be key. Just interesting. We'll see how he looks in comparison with Thompson. I wouldn't be surprised if Thompson looked better by comparison initially because he's NFL veteran. He started on Sundays. There's more experience there. Like I said, been with the system a little bit longer in terms of getting his hands on the playbook. So, we'll see. I mean, I think, Howard can still impress, and hopefully we hear good things about all these guys. And we probably will overall, but just want to hear maybe Howard looks just as good as Thompson or better, which is fantastic. Or maybe he looks a little bit worse. And if he does, that's okay because he's a rookie taking his first kind of, I don't want to say real reps, but first time as a team coming together and working.
Look, so far, Howard's taken more snaps at quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers than Skylar has.
Sure, yeah, with rookie minicamp, yeah. I mean, yeah, totally. But that
ought to translate a little.
I think it gets balanced out by Thompson's experience in the NFL. When you've played in a stadium, practicing an environment like this is nothing to it. I don't think.
Oh, so you're saying we're talking about practice here, right?
Not a game. We're talking about practice, but we'll see. And again, it's hard to really truly evaluate any of these guys. When quarterbacks know they can't get hit, it's a little bit easier to drop back in the pocket and stand tall there. But still good to watch these guys because you've never seen Howard and Thompson throw in his Steelers uniform before, and Rudolph his first time in the Arthur Smith offense. So a lot to learn. All right, we covered that pretty well. So we now have to kind of deal with the Aaron Rodgers commentary, and this is what you sign up for when you pursue Aaron Rodgers. The decision still waiting on that, but he spoke at a Mike Stud concert, or at least in my day, Dave, my high school days. He went was referred to as Mike Stud. I think he goes by just Mike now, but
I don't even know who that is.
I know. I barely know. I'm struggling through it clearly here. Point is, Rodgers was speaking at a 90-minute Q&A session at a concert in Austin, Texas. I assume this was coinciding with the Joe Rogan interview because Rogan is based out of Austin, Texas, or Texas and somewhere in there. He was asked about Rodgers was a couple things. One, would he ever play for the Chicago Bears? Rodgers kind of laughed at it and then said there's a team that plays in Chicago this year, road trip, and then kind of hemmed and hawed about it, but very much implying about Pittsburgh playing in Chicago week 12. So that was kind of the most notable comment. I think there was even one about the Vikings and playing this year. And then he made a comment about there's a game in Ireland, which of course is the Steelers and Vikings game. Rodgers also was shot down the lingering speculation about playing for the Saints. Rodgers said he had no interest in doing that. I think he just didn't want to play in the South. I don't know what his rationale was, but the most notable comment was kind of that hint of playing in Chicago this year, which of course would be as a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Well, you add all three of those comments together. You know, the team that plays the Bears. There's a noting that the Vikings play in Ireland this year, and I'm probably not gonna land in New Orleans. I mean, those were all notable when all combined together.
Yeah, I think certainly in totality of it, all indications, and really the first time since the McAfee interview that Rodgers has spoken about his future. There was the Rogan interview, but he didn't talk about football at all. It really makes it sound like he is coming, but if anything, that just begs the question more, okay, why haven't you signed? If it does sound like you are coming to Pittsburgh and you basically believe that is going to be your future, OTAs start tomorrow and you're in Austin, Texas, hanging out, which is fine, but it'll beg the question, you can do that, but you can't show up at OTAs for a couple of practices?
Sure, that's why we talked about a couple of shows ago about the optics and all right now, and especially on the heels of him saying that he's got all this personal stuff that he has to put to bed, but yet the camera has seemed to find him at various locations, right? And he's got time for the Joe Rogan interview, and he's got time to show up at these concerts and do hour and a half Q&As and those kind of things. So yeah, that will be the pushback is okay. All signs point to you coming to Pittsburgh. When are you coming to Pittsburgh?
Right. And I want to try to give him grace like I have. And you can go to a concert and still have personal things going on. People always balance the good and bad in their lives. But to your point and the point that's being made, I know Mark Schlereth made the point on TV today that you can go to concerts, but you can't go to OTAs. Why can't it's only 6 practices. They're not long. You can be there in Pittsburgh Tuesday through Thursday, fly back to California if you want to for Friday, and then come back the next Tuesday if you really need to go home and take care of stuff. So, I've made the point many times, Dave, that my personal deadline for Rodgers is essentially today, tomorrow, start of OTAs. I mean, you could argue, well, maybe if he's there for mandatory minicamp and does some spring work, then okay, at least he's doing that. But if you can't be bothered to show up and put in the sweat equity as a quarterback that's never played for the Steelers before, as somebody who has not played in this system. I mean, he played for LaFleur, and there's a little bit of similarity between LaFleur's offense and Arthur Smith's, but still, it's not the Arthur Smith offense. And I know he's 41, and it doesn't always mean a lot for a 41-year-old quarterback, but it means a lot for the guys who are there, the young guys who have to get used to you, because Rodgers brings a very high level of expectation and demand, and he wants everything detailed and perfect, which is great. But you need to be there with those guys so they can understand that, A, and then B, execute that. And this is lost opportunity if he's not there.
Is it the end of the world, though, for these 6 practices?
It's not the end of the world, but what does it say about his level of commitment to your team if he cannot show up for some OTA sessions when the other guys are there and they're putting in the work and your quarterback can't? And I know that Russ can get a lot of flack last year, but Russ put in the work. That dude was at everything. Justin Fields put in the work. That dude was at everything. And Rodgers says, I don't want to be there for OTAs because I don't need to, or I don't want to, or whatever the case is, while he's making comments basically saying he's going to be a Steeler. If he was truly still undecided about his future, then you could sit there and argue, well, he's still thinking about what he wants to do, and he's not in a position to commit, and so that's why he's missing. But he was already kind of mentally committed and is basically hinting and kind of even trolling at that. Then you really wonder, okay, what is the reason for not being there?
Right, and assuming if he does miss miss these first 6, and we'll see what happens with mandatory minicamp, and if he does eventually sign, I would assume he'd be peppered with questions first time he meets the media. What was the holdup?
Right, which is fair and fine because when you're not there, as we just talked about, who gets peppered with the questions now? Not Aaron Rodgers. He'll be wherever he's at. It's going to be every other player there. It's going to be Mason Rudolph. It's going to be Will Howard. It's going to be the entire team. It's going to be Dante Kent. It's going to be asked about Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. I'm Dante Kent. I'm just trying to figure out my own stuff out. So it is unfair to the players to have to sit there and address your situation while you're not there, while you're doing whatever you're doing, somewhere else in the world.
All right, well, we'll get our first answer to the first line in the sand within 24 hours for sure.
We've all just been guessing, and even insiders it's almost been kind of funny to watch the insiders basically flail the Schefters, the Rappaports, the Peliceros, because they have no idea what's going to happen, but they're still asked about it because it's still one of those outstanding, lingering NFL questions of what is Rodgers doing? And the reporters just have to sit there and try to have some sort of an answer, even though no one really knows. But all that to say that no one knows what Rodgers will do and when he'll sign. But when do you think, Dave, he will sign with Pittsburgh? During OTAs, during minicamp, or training camp? I'll put it in those 3 buckets to not make a date on it, but sometime during OTAs, during minicamp, or during training camp, which is the most likely time he signs?
I don't know. I truly don't have a good grasp on this. He zigs when you think he zags, and I don't have a true great idea. I guess just from a logical standpoint, mandatory minicamp, assuming this is a guy that indeed does not like OTAs, I would like to think that he knows the importance of at least mandatory minicamp. So if push comes to shove and there being no signs at this point in time on the Twitter machine that he's going to sign within the next 24 hours, which obviously could change in a matter of 5 minutes, 2 minutes, I will say my best prediction is that he signs before the start of mandatory minicamp.
Okay, that's kind of my inclination too. Although it is the last line in the sand of workouts before training camp, functionally it's really no different than OTAs. Minicamp and OTAs are the same thing. It's the same style of practice. There's no functional practical difference between the two. So if you're not there for OTAs, why show up for minicamp?
Because the term mandatory is mandatory, and
He's under contract. There's
sure,
no
but if
obligation.
you're going to be on this team, if behind closed doors everybody knows you're going to be on the team, then it makes it mandatory for you, in my opinion.
Okay, fair. And I agree. I mean, if he's not there for the spring workouts at all, I don't know how Pittsburgh can justify still being in on Rodgers, even understanding he is the best quarterback talent-wise available. I don't disagree with that. But I don't think you can sit there and straight face to the locker room and say, this is our guy. He'll be here at some point if he's not there for OTAs and minicamp in June, which is June 10th through the 12th.
Because when you break the huddle at mandatory mini camp, you've got a 5.5 week, whatever span it is before. Okay, guys, get ready. Aaron's coming. Be ready for Aaron. Well, okay. How do we prepare for that? That's why I say, even though I think the term mandatory, even for guys that aren't yet under contract, assuming that everybody assumes that he's going to be under contract, that makes it just as mandatory for Aaron Rodgers, if all that makes sense.
Fair. No, it does make sense. I do understand your point. I guess if you're Pittsburgh, as I've said before, you waited this long, so you might as well keep waiting, even though that kind of plays into the sunk cost fallacy of, well, we've already invested so much, so let's just keep investing into it. But I think more rationally, you could sit there and say, yeah, it sucks that Rodgers wasn't there for OTAs and minicamp, but if he's going to be our best quarterback, then all that we care about is September, October, November, December, January. And if he's the guy that can win a playoff game in January, no one is going to care about him not showing up at minicamp in June. And our goal is on winning in January, not winning in June. And if Rodgers could still be that guy, then he's still the guy.
Well, I think that's if he's not there for mandatory minicamp, then as you mentioned, not only the optics but the players throughout the whatever players do have media appearances, it's putting them in an unfair position. What do you think about Aaron Rodgers is supposed to be part of the Steelers, and the first time you're really going to see him is when everybody shows up at Latrobe, and he's wanting everybody to wear tape with their names on their helmet so he knows who's who and those kind of things there. So I think you do. I think if you're the Steelers, you do have to kind of question where all these narratives that you hear out there. How serious is Aaron Rodgers about this if he's not willing to commit to the team at least by the time for minicamp? I can turn my head for the OTAs, but come mandatory minicamp, once again, because it is mandatory for players under contract, and if he's still expected to come, that makes it mandatory, and it's a little bit tougher to explain away no matter what's going on in his personal life, because we all go through things in our personal life with our loved ones or what have you outside of the game, and that it just makes it a tougher sell as an organization. Yeah, he's coming, but he said he just prefers to be there for the start of training camp, and he'll think he's going to assume the rest of you are doing your jobs and will be ready for him when he gets here.
Right. No, I totally get that, and you're right. If he misses all the spring, like he would have, I don't want to phrase that way, but if he misses all the spring and you go to training camp and let's say a receiver runs the wrong route and Rodgers gets pissed at you for it, then if you're that receiver, you just sit there and say, man, I wish you were there in the spring. Maybe we wouldn't be having these problems if we had worked together in May and June, and we wouldn't have a miscommunication on a site adjustment or a check or something come training camp or come the regular season. And so that falls more on Rodgers than it would necessarily the player. I just put this poll up on Twitter. Maybe we'll check in by the end of the show as well for any change of asking that same question. I asked you, Dave, when does Rodgers sign with Pittsburgh? I put before OTAs, before minicamp, before training camp, and not at all. The leader is not at all, which I don't know if that's the most likely outcome here, followed by before training camp, before minicamp, and then before OTAs, bringing up the rear. So most people think not at all, but it seems to be that minicamp, training camp as the most realistic target if he does sign at some point with the Steelers.
Well, are they checking that not at all box because they don't want him there?
Yeah, it feels a little more personal on that. Yeah. I put it as when, not what is your preference, but people might be taking it a different way. So we'll see. The thing, though, I get your point about making a difference in distinction between OTAs and minicamp, but who is going to be at minicamp that won't be at OTAs on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense? What offensive player is not going to be there for these next 2 weeks that will show up for mandatory minicamp?
I would like to think that we're going to have heavy participation throughout OTAs.
Agreed. Maybe some defensive guys miss. I think even last year, Watt with a contract, but even I think in general, Watt sometimes misses some time. Cam will probably be there for most of them, if not all of them. I know he wasn't last year because of the contract. But I can't think of a single offensive player who's going to skip OTAs. Maybe somebody has a thing come up where they miss a day, whatever. But so that point is, it's going to be the exact same as mandatory minicamp. The whole group is there. The practices are the same. So it's still hard for me to make a difference between OTAs and minicamp because it's the same thing.
Sure, but once again, you tag on that mandatory into it, and that's what changes it for me.
Okay, fair enough. And yeah, for minicamp, it's 3 practices. If you can't be bothered for that, it's hard to justify, being bothered for being this team's not franchise quarterback.
Especially when you've got another 6-week lull within there, and if he, how much, if any, is he planning on getting guys together, even though he's not signed, bringing them out to UCLA or whatever, and how much real good work without a coaching staff can you get done, within that time. That's why those 3 days I think are very set a tone, and you can work on timing and work on, just all of it. That's why I think mandatory minicamp so crucial.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what if someone made the argument? I think somebody did on some show, I don't know where it was, over the weekend that said, well, what if he gets some guys together in California? He's worked out with DK Metcalf before.
Great.
Does that count?
I mean, it's just icing on top of the cake, especially if he's attended mandatory minicamp.
But I guess the point is, can you argue that as a substitute for him missing OTAs minicamp if
No.
he's doing some? Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. 100%. It's not the same. Yes, throwing the receivers is fine and good on top of, as you said, the cherry on top, but it's not. You're not working the whole offense. You're not working against a defense. You're not working with your offensive line. You're not working with your coaching staff. You're not doing any of those things. And to me, it's not a substitute.
All right.
All right, Dave, let's briefly talk about one study I did over the weekend. There's been a narrative around Will Howard. We discussed it. You actually, you were the inspiration, the wind beneath my wings of this study came about Will Howard and his work under center. You had talked about some of the snaps he had gotten under center, and so I wanted to expand upon that, and courtesy of Pro Football Focus, hooking us up with some data on that showed Will Howard had about 10%.
Explain the narrative first and foremost that was going around, the complete narrative that was going around.
Yeah, the narrative of there's a big problem with Will Howard, that he didn't play under center in college, that he has to make this adjustment to working under center, and that makes him a real risk or a big projection in some sense. And so that was the narrative. It was a college-style offense that was RPO heavy, shotgun based, and so he's not NFL ready, and there's a big hurdle to leap to make that jump across. And so I put the numbers to it, again, courtesy of Pro Football Focus, and of the FBS quarterbacks drafted in 2025, throughout their entire college careers, Howard had the second most snaps under center with 265. Only Graham Mertz had more, almost 1,200. He played at Wisconsin before transferring to Florida, and so Wisconsin, a very under center pro-style offense. But Howard, the second highest number of overall snaps, the third highest percentage. He had 9.5% of his career college snaps across Kansas State and Ohio State were under center. Only Mertz and Kyle McCord had a higher rate under center. So it's not a huge percentage, obviously, but it's 10%, which is not nothing. And so my conclusion is, you compare this to Cam Ward, who spent 1.5% of his snaps under center. Shedeur Sanders, 2%. Jackson Dart, 2.3%. Jalen Milroe, 3.1%. Tyler Shuck, just under 5%. Howard sitting there at almost 10%. This is a guy that is more pro-ready than most of the others, that he's worked under center before. And while every quarterback will have to adjust to playing under center more in the NFL than they did in college, to me, this is not a concern with Will Howard. He's done it. He's repped it. Of course, you factor in reps in practice. He got 2, I'm sure. You can't calculate that, but he got tons of snaps there, I'm sure, as well. This is a non-story, Dave.
I agree. And this obviously means now the reason that you address this, and we have addressed this narrative and blown this narrative out of the water, you did so with the idea that, without a doubt, Will Howard's the next Tom Brady, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly the point I'm making. So
why do you think, why, I know why, just because people don't have anything else. Why the pushback on trying to bust the narrative and saying, look, this guy is at least, got more, some of the most experience of this quarterback class under center. Why is that all of a sudden pushed into, oh, well, that means Alex Kozora and the guys at Steeler Depot think that Will Howard's going to be the best rookie quarterback to come out of this class?
Well, I think it was mostly just one guy who made that comment, maybe in some sort of sarcastic jest about it. And I've made the point that we don't want to put this guy on a pedestal. He's still a rookie, still a 6th rounder, still has to earn his keep. Let's let him throw a pass before we get too hyped up about his future. I'm excited about Will Howard. I'm happy he's a Steeler. He was a great value to get in the 6th round, but a lot to watch, a lot to learn. But yeah, I mean, I think most people understood the study well, and whether or not they think I'm glazing the guy or not, the point is, this is the data, and the data suggests that he played under center a lot more than a typical normal college quarterback, and it's not going to be this big hurdle in learning curve to the NFL.
And then when you add on to that, look, I don't know how many of this draft class actually did cadences versus the hand clap and all like that, but I think we learned a great deal in the John Gruden interview, quarterback, what do they call that, QB
Class camp.
class camp, whatever. Uh, that this guy has some experience with the cadence and with the changing of plays and stuff like that, and especially a lot more than a Jackson Dart and all like that. I mean that's you combine that with the fact that he is used to taking snaps under center. That's got to count for something in his favor.
For sure. And I know that Howard gets zonked for being in an RPO heavy offense, but it was, there was still pro style concepts under Chip Kelly, who of course coached in the NFL. So to me, I thought he was coached well and coached ready for the NFL.
There are a lot of things you can gig Will Howard on coming out. And look, I still think one of the major concerns with him might be the overall arm strength and maybe some of the anticipatory throws and all like that. But you can't sit here and say the demise of Will Howard in the NFL or the potential demise of Will Howard in the NFL is relegated to lack of under center snaps in college.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% overall. So just wanted to at least address that particular point. And even if you do ding Howard for the RPO nature of the Ohio State offense, RPO is pretty popular in the NFL. Not super popular in an Arthur Smith offense, but it's not exactly a foreign concept at the NFL level. And there's an argument to be made. Pittsburgh might want to run more RPOs this year. Give their team, their offense, some more flexibility. So does this mean Howard's going to be a great quarterback? Of course not. But it is just to address that one specific point and narrative that has been going around that Howard has not worked under center, that it's a big issue. To me, it is a non-issue, non-story.
All right, good job on that. That's what we've kind of prided ourselves on doing over the years, is busting up some of these narratives with cold, hard facts.
Exactly. And if you want the specific breakdown for Howard, 265 career snaps under center, 56 passes, 209 run plays, a heavy run tilt, but that's common for every quarterback on this list, and still had the second most passes of any quarterback under center, only behind, like I said, Graham Mertz. I think Will Howard was a much better prospect than Mertz was coming out of the draft.
All right. How many dropbacks? Do you have the dropback percentage?
The percentage of under center for Howard?
Yeah.
9.5%.
No, on dropbacks?
I'm a little confused about what you're asking.
I mean, on passing plays.
Oh, for just the passing play percentage? I can just do the quick math here. He had 56 out of... You're asking for the percentage of dropbacks relative to the number of total under center snaps, or total snaps in his career, shotgun and...
Whichever way you want to frame that.
Okay, well, if I do percentage of pass plays from just his under center work, so 56 out of 265, that is 21.1%.
Okay. And how does that relate to the rest of the class?
I'd have to check. It's probably similar. McCord might be a little bit higher percentage. I can check McCord's here really quickly, but Howard still went out. McCord was only 17.3%, so Howard jumped him there. So probably second, only behind Graham Mertz.
All right.
Actually, might be ahead of Graham Mertz, because Mertz had a lot of run plays. They love running the ball up there in Wisconsin. Let's quickly on Graham Mertz. Mertz was at 22.3, so he just was ahead of Will Howard in that percentage of pass plays under center.
Okay.
All right, Dave, anything else to talk about? I am, because I'm a madman, working on a really long article. It'll be a multi-series article that won't come out until after mandatory minicamp, I'm sure. But it's going to be... I don't want to give everything away. It's ranking. It's a big ranking post. But I want to ask you this one question, Dave. And I did not bring it up in our 6-hour pre-production meeting today, so I apologize. But there was an article, I think CBS had written it, one of the off-season fodder articles about the best teams in NFL history. And they ranked the 78, I think it was the 78 Steelers as the third best team in NFL history. Of course, the best team in Steelers history. I wanted to ask you, what is the best season Pittsburgh has ever had? What is their best year in franchise history?
Just in general?
Yeah, if you were ranking the Steelers teams, what was the number one team, the number one season I would assume it'd be one of the 6 Super Bowl winning teams at the start. And so basically the question is, out of those 6, who was the best team? What was the best season of those 6?
Yeah, I mean 78's hard to bypass.
Yeah, I mean, but any of the 70s dynasties you could argue for. Would you argue? Probably wouldn't argue the '08 Steelers. Probably the defense was great. I don't know if the offense was good enough to hang with those 70s teams.
I mean, the 2008 defense will surely be remembered for play against the run and the adjusted net yards passing per attempt stat and all like that. But it was still kind of that the era at the time of stop in the run. Overall, I don't know. 78 still sticks out to me as the best season.
Looking at 79, they scored 416 points that year. That was well more than 78. They gave up a lot more points than 79 as well. But yeah, 78, 14-2, Super Bowl win. Okay. I just didn't know if you had a different take. Some would say the 76 Steelers were the best team of that dynasty's run, despite it not ending in even a Super Bowl appearance. That was that historically good defense. That 76 defense was the best defense, bar none, of the entire dynasty run. It was the offense where Bradshaw had gotten hurt early in the season, and then Franco and Rocky were hurt for the title game against the Raiders, and they lost that one. But there were some comments I'd gotten that some making the case that 76 was actually the best Steelers team.
All right, and how are you going about looking at this?
Ranking the Steelers teams.
All right,
from best to worst.
All right,
So
I don't want you to give away too much there.
Hard at work at that. All right. That's just my random question for you. All right, Dave, anything else? Any other late breaking news? If not, we can read some emails, close out today's show, and then go eat some hot dogs.
All right. Did you have any questions about my cash article?
Yes, you had that up, and I love the photo of the Art Rooney on the $1,000 bill. It's a nice, was that, can I cash it in? Can I print that out and use that at the store?
Not legal tender, I don't think.
Not legal tender, fair enough. Give an overview, before I get to questions, just give an overview of what the article is about.
Yeah, just looking at, we've talked a lot about the cash spending and what we expect the cash spending to be for 2025 specifically. And what I do is I start out at looking at what the Steelers spent cash-wise versus the cap for the 2024 season, the first year of the 3-year span. And then trying to look at the previous 3-year cash versus cap spending ratios from the 2021 to 2023 CBA period, and then how they ended up spending for the 3-year period 97% of the league's total cap number for those 3 years in cash. And once again, they, you could say that, do they have to spend up and above this year's cap number in cash? No, because they were almost right at 90% for the first year in 2024. Logic tells you that if they really wanted to, they could spend 90% this year and then go into the final year and spend 90%, satisfy the terms of the CBA. I've looking at their previous 3-year run in the CBA, cash versus cap. The middle year, 2022, was the year that they went more than 100% of the cap, and I expect the same thing to be done this year as well, too. And if you do indeed subscribe to the theory that they're going to spend at least 100% of the cap number this year in cash, this year, then there's no reason to think that a TJ Watt contract extension won't get done. B, there's no reason to think that signing a guy like Aaron Rodgers for at least $10 million in cash in 2025 won't get done. The big question is, if indeed Aaron Rodgers does sign, are we looking at a $10 million cash expenditure? Are we looking at a $25 million cash expenditure? Long story short, I'm expecting, like I've said the other day, this team to spend probably somewhere between another $40 to $43 million in cash from right now until the start of the season, or they're after, because you got the practice squad, and I take all that into account. I take into account off-season injury settlements. Take into account workout bonus amounts, and everything along those lines. So and I've looked ahead at what I expected the new cash spending for TJ Watt to be in 2025 as a part of his contract extension that I expect to happen. I open up the idea that this team could give Chris Boswell more cash in 2025, let's say about $3 million additional cash that way. I'm open to this team, and there's a very distinct possibility that Deshaun Elliott gets a contract extension this offseason. So, lack of a better word, as the title of this post says, the Steelers unlikely to be cashed out for the 2025 season based on history. So this is a projection on my part. Starting, I don't know, what was it, a season or two ago, I started getting into heavily looking at cash spending versus the cap spending in trying to predict how active a team will be and the actual kind of cash spending, so that fans will kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. This is a projection only based on my studies. This is a projection that relies heavily on what the Steelers did in the last 3-year period. And I will be quite surprised if this team does not spend at least around another $40 million in cash between now and the start of the regular season.
So kind of walk me through, what would you expect the cash amounts to be on a Watt extension and a Rodgers contract? I know the Rodgers contract's probably even harder to figure out than the Watt extension, but what is that number you would expect it to be if I made you give an answer?
Right now, TJ Watt is scheduled to have a cash, and he's being accounted for as a cash value of $21 million in 2025. When looking at along with my buddy Daniel Salib, who's a contract expert that I ask a lot of questions to as far as structure and all like that, as far as market value related to guys like Myles Garrett and some of these other edge rushers. I'm expecting Watt's new cash total for 2025 after the extension to be around another 17 to 19 million more in cash. So let's say it's 19. Let's even say it's 20 million more. Anywhere between 17 and 20 million more. That would make Watt's new cash spending amount for 2025 at around 40 to 41 million on the high side.
And then with Rodgers, what would his cash number be?
That's the great question, right? Aaron Rodgers claims that he would play for $10 million. I'm not quite buying that. Not saying that it can't happen. I'm thinking it's probably going to come in more around the $20 million range. But that is the hardest. If you don't spend at least $20 million on Rodgers, where is the other cash spending going to come from? Will it indeed be Chris Boswell? Will it be a contract extension for Deshaun Elliott to up his cash by another $3 million? Even between Boswell and Elliott, I think the max kind of additional cash spending that you're looking at is really around $6 million there. So let's say Watt's $20 million additional. Let's say Rodgers comes in at $10 million for whatever reason. That's $30 million. How are you going to make up that extra, let's say $10 million? You could probably get $6 million of it taken care of with Boswell and Elliott. But I mean, I think that's how you get there. I think the big variable at this point, and it's obviously the elephant in the room, is will Aaron Rodgers indeed sign? And if he does, what will his 2025 cash value look like? Will it be 10 million? Will it be 25 million? Will it be 18 million? That's the biggest unknown variable at this point.
But based on your expected and most realistic projections, Watt and Rodgers combined would be at 60 million cash spending. Am I reading that right?
Well, above and beyond what they are now, because remember, Watt's at 21 million right now. So
yeah, well, you said 40 million on Watt.
Right. So that would be an additional 19 million. So let's say because we're looking at how much more they're going to
Okay.
spend in cash.
Okay. So Watt's at 19 and Rodgers is at, let's call it 20. Let's just call it 40 million in cash spending.
Above and beyond what they're on the books to spend right now.
Mm-hmm. How much further do they need to go to kind of hit their targets? Because it sounds like on those moves alone, they're pretty much right there.
Yeah, I'm expecting them to spend anywhere between 40 and 43 million more.
Okay, so if you're at 40 with those two, it moves at the projected, expected-ish numbers, then maybe you do something else with likely Boswell push that money up to get you to 43.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. Anything else to note or look for? Is there a free agent they could sign? Is there a trade they could make in season? Obviously, those things are completely unknowns, but other variables to think about.
Well, and it all revolves around the variable of how much Aaron Rodgers cash goes to him this year. I mean, if he signs, let's say it's 15. I mean, that definitely opens up some money to go towards another wide receiver.
Right. That's the other thing too. Yeah, did they go at a receiver as well? And we'll just have to wait and see on that.
Right. Now, if you're let's say you're using 20 more million in additional cash to sign Watt, and it cost you 20 more million in 2025 cash for Aaron Rodgers, and you do another 3 million for Boswell, you're at 43 million there. Technically, can you overspend? Can you spend more than that? Look, spending another 43 million more would put this team around 102%, 102.5% over the cap number. It's hard to make me believe that they would get into the 105% over this year's cap number in cash spending.
Probably. Maybe if they were having a good season in season, they made a trade for somebody, maybe that would give them incentive to push it. They could also be at, say, 37 million and they just make up that difference next year. And yeah, you have to spend a little bit more, but you're not going to make any crazy signings that jeopardize your team, even if you have to spend another 6 million in cash.
Right, but if you're acquiring somebody mid-season anyway, you're talking about a discounted half salary cash rate too.
Yeah, it just depends how big the contract is. He was making 10 million and you put another 5 million on the book.
Sure.
So that's 5 million. But if it's 2 million, then yeah, it's not going to move the needle too much. Let me ask you a question that may be tough to answer. Where does this cash come from? I mean, there's revenue, obviously. Like, how do you get 40 million to what is that? Is that in a bank account? Like, how does that work?
Well, I mean, and that's the other thing, and I think we even got an email along these lines as well too. Roger Goodell recently spoke about how in this next CBA they're going to have to look at the integrity of the cap system. Okay, and I'm sort of answering the email question along the lines of this. I think where the big concern is right now, and look, here's the thing that people still have a hard time getting past. Cap dollars accounting is different from cash accounting dollars. All right. Those are two different things, albeit though that teams have to spend at least 90% of the cap total in cash over a 3-year span. People still have a hard time dividing up those different directions, that cap dollars are different than cash dollars. Okay. Now, where Roger Goodell is coming, the comments that about Roger Goodell saying we've got to look at the integrity of the salary cap system, I'm assuming relies mostly around the fact that teams now, the deeper pocket teams, the guys that get these, you see these, who was the Cleveland Browns just took on Charles Woodson as a minority owner, right?
At 0.1%, yeah, but point taken, yeah.
But teams are constantly looking at adding to their ownership for cash influx, right?
Well, the NFL allowed that, right? They allowed investors to now come in at whatever that was.
Right. And teams obviously get the revenue sharing and the whole TV package. And I'm not well versed on exactly where where all this cash comes from, but obviously merchandise and marketing and TV revenue and all like that. And then there's obviously teams have their stadium deals and stuff like that that are expenditures and all like that. But the crux of the matter, I think, where you have Roger Goodell talking about integrity of the cap, is that teams with deeper pocket. Look, it was for a long time understood, or was kind of an understood that, hey, spend all you want, but at some point, you're going to pay for your cash spendings on the cap spendings aspect of it. In other words, spend all you want, but sooner or later you've got to pay for this in the cap portion, especially short term and let's say 5-year periods. Okay, and that. But what has happened here, especially through the COVID years, is teams have become more cognizant that they can use these void years, that they can use these option bonuses, and then thus turn those option bonuses into signing bonuses, and thus extend out the 5-year, essentially, for cap amortization into much longer periods of time. So thus the deeper pocket teams, whereas once it was thought that, okay, you could probably overspend in cash back to back years, but in the third year, and definitely the fourth year, it's going to come the chickens are going to come to roost in the cap spending department. Well, teams have learned now that because of the rate that the salary cap is going up, that if you push ahead $10 million into future, let's say you give a guy a signing bonus of $30 million, or let's use a round number of $50 million signing bonus, and then you amortize that at $10 million cap in each of the next 5 years. Well, $10 million against the salary cap number this year is going to be a higher percentage than it will be in the following year. And then thus, when you get 5 years away, that $10 million against the cap is a much lower percentage against the cap than it was the original year that you started amortizing that out. So what teams are doing now is they're using these void years in almost a lot of different situations, not only in signing bonuses, traditional signing of contracts, but in restructures, and then option bonuses that don't take effect until like the second or third years, and they're kind of rolling option bonuses. You can keep pushing out the cap dollars away, and those cap dollars essentially have lower percentages counting against the cap than they did much closer to the time that the deal was done. So that allows cash to become more of a king in the early years, because you're pushing further out the cap repercussions of the cash when it was spent. Does that make sense? So thus, that's where Roger Goodell's talking about they have to look at the integrity of the cap system, because more and more teams that have the deeper pockets are saying, we'll just push the cap down. We'll just kick it on down the line because it's a smart thing to do, because $10 million today, or $10 million against the cap 5 years from now, is very insequential than it is right now.
But how is that different than the old traditional way of just restructuring contracts, which is the original can kicking?
Yeah, because you weren't adding the void years. You weren't pushing it out in void years and all that.
I know, but it's the same can kicking. Can kicking is can kicking, right?
Right, but sooner or later, in a 3 or 4 year span, especially if the contract goes bad, or your player goes bad, it was a lot. It had stronger repercussions in a system that you did not see teams using these void years and teams not stacking these option bonuses up.
Okay, fair. Yeah, I do think void years is something that, as you said, it was used a little bit pre-COVID. I think the Saints had used it. The Eagles had used it under Howie Roseman, who's a financial, whiz lawyer background. but it's become a lot more prevalent, obviously, post-COVID because the salary cap had that reduction that 1 year, and teams like Pittsburgh had to scramble to just survive the year and deal with the cap constriction. And so void years was one way to get around that, and Pittsburgh did that with a couple of contracts and haven't done that since. So I do think that that's one thing. I wonder, are there other things you think he's referencing? Could it be teams that offer these now partial base salary guarantees to get around the undrafted free agent pool, and they offer, $250,000 to do that? Could that be something else they look at? Probably not high on the list of the NFL's concerns for what is relatively small amounts of money.
I don't think that's as high on their concerns because, but
But that's
still,
cap manipulation, isn't it?
it's
In a
not so
sense?
much cap manipulation as it is the rookie signing pool manipulation. I
It's
guess.
rule manipulation. It's circumventing the
Sure.
cap that's designed to keep costs down for these undrafted free agents. Yeah, I shouldn't say cap manipulation, but I wonder if it's that. I wonder if it is.
Do they need a
can't-
cap within a cap? Well, do they need a rookie cap within a rookie cap?
Well, you would just say you can't give partial base salary guarantees to undrafted free agents if you want to close that kind of loophole. I don't think that's high on the NFL's concerns and not my personal list. But I mean, I don't think it's about the ownership in terms of teams getting extra money, because the NFL literally just allowed that to happen by bringing on additional investors at, what was it, 10% or so. So I don't know if that's the concern the NFL has right
Well,
now.
it's the manipulation of cash versus cap dollars, which teams are now, like I said, teams. Cash is still cash. You still have to have the cash to pay the player. But if you're circumventing it, if there's no punishment in real time inflation of the cap, it makes a lot more sense to continue. If you've got the cash to spend year after year after year above and beyond the cap, because the cap repercussions can be put off further down the line, and thus your cash that you spend now, the cap repercussions of it can be pushed 8, 9, 10 years down the line. That's where the people willing to put up the cash and have the cash to escrow, the deeper pocket teams are learning that you can indeed just be. In other words, you can start going over 3, 4, 5 year spans and spending and try to buy, per se, a championship, because you're pushing off the cap that goes along with it, even though these same teams are spending to the cap every year.
Okay, I guess I see what you're saying. I mean, I think it's another really under-discussed part of the salary
It
cap.
is.
Well, because I think teams are focusing more and more, and you said it, on percentage of cap, especially for these large contracts. Okay, how much of our salary cap is made up by our quarterback, by our receivers, and that's talked about a whole lot more internally than it gets discussed externally. What is the percentage of a position group or a quarterback or a player relative to our cap? That's a number I think teams focus on a whole lot more than they have in the past.
Yeah, how much is a player percentage-wise versus the cap?
Right. And there are like benchmarks for quarterbacks. They should account for, I think, roughly, maybe some people say 17% of the cap or something like that. And those things get talked about a lot when you work on these mega contracts.
But obviously, you have the salary cap increasing every year, and then thus the value of certain positions. So if you lock up a long-term guy now at a quarterback value of, let's say, 50 million, and then you're constantly pushing back the cap repercussions of that beyond 5 years, then you're obviously pushing off. Unless the quarterback comes back to you, which they do, we want more money. I suppose it's relevant that way. But once again, the big concern here is that, and look, the NFL, whatever pushback that the league has as far as the integrity of the cap versus what teams are trying to do versus back to back years of high spending above the cap in cash, the NFLPA is going to say, whoa, hold on here. We want these teams throwing all this cash year after year at our players, right?
Sure. So what is the fix?
The fix is probably going to come down somewhere probably eliminating void years, but then there's probably going to have to be, I don't know, this is where uh my math knowledge and finance knowledge kind of ends. Are you going to have to have some sort of inflationary aspect related to uh pushing money beyond 5 years of something via option bonuses and all like that? Will a team have to pay inflationary cap charges on option bonuses and all like that because of the cap dollars spent now for future years not decreasing or increasing heavily versus the cap dollars?
I'm over my skis here, but can't you just make a blanket rule that you can't prorate anything out past 5 years? That's how signing bonuses work in to the letter right now anyway, correct?
Right, but what's going to stop somebody from having the option bonus and then saying, well, we're turning in that into a signing bonus so we get 5 more years on top of it?
I'm not following that example too well.
All right, 3 years into into a deal, a bulk of the player's guaranteed money comes. In other words, you're guaranteeing money in future years, and then you're paying that option bonus, and then beyond the original 5 years of the contract, you're getting amortization of more large sums of cash payment beyond the original 5 years of the deal.
Well, yeah, I would just say you can't amortize and prorate past the 5th year of the original contract. So you can put an option bonus, that's fine, but you can't prorate that past the 5th year. You can prorate over the next 2 if it comes in the 3rd year.
But then you're getting into situations where the NFLPA is going to push back and say, look, we want our players to get paid. You're discouraging large cash payments to our players in the 3rd year of our deal.
Yeah, I'm just talking what is the NFL's proposal, what their solutions could be. And I would sit there.
That's above my pay rate right now. Just and from what is the perfect solution, and once again, what you end up thinking might be the perfect solution, somebody's going to try to find a way to cheat that as well too.
Oh yeah. I mean, and on void years, if the proposal, and I know we're just spitballing ideas, you're not hammering and saying they must get rid of void years, but if you did that or had big restrictions, what if 5 years from now there's some other cap constriction where the cap reduces for God knows what reason? You wouldn't expect it to, but no one expected it to for 2021 post-COVID. No one could have predicted that. And what if that option, that arrow that you can fire as a team is no longer available, and that could really hurt teams from that aspect?
Well, I think what you're going to see from the pushback, obviously from the NFLPA in all this, is every contract a player signs should be fully guaranteed.
Yeah, but that's gonna be a CBA thing that's gonna get negotiated in
Sure.
2030.
Well, this whole thing is going to be CBA negotiations probably before this current CBA ends, because you got the whole additional. There's nothing to say that they can't renegotiate the CBA at any time, and I think you're going to see that, and especially with Goodell coming out now and says we got to start looking at and start having deeper discussions about salary cap integrity long and before I would think 2030.
Yeah, but I don't see the counter to let's tweak the void year language to giving up that for fully guaranteed contracts.
No, I just think that's going to be part of the whole giant picture here, though.
And how much has the NFL union even argued for fully guaranteed contracts in past actual CBA?
Oh, I'm sure they are. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
you want every player that comes into the league to earn 100% of his contract. Why wouldn't you if you're part of the CBA?
Okay, no, I get it, but what do they?
I mean, the NFLPA.
What do they have to show for it? The structure hasn't changed. The rookie contracts are fully guaranteed for. Is it for every
rounders
or just first rounders? But that came at rookies making a whole lot less than they used to be making, and that was the trade off there. So it was a win really for the NFL because they're paying these players a whole lot less than they would have been.
Right, so, but they've slowly gotten more and more of the salary cap having to be paid out cash over the years too.
Yeah, but I'm talking fully guaranteed money. I mean, what progress has the union made in a pursuit to fully guarantee all player contracts?
Not great, and that's their fault. That's why I talk
Yeah.
about all the time. They come out of these things talking a big game at the start. We got to sit out a year. We got to get into these owners' pockets and all. But and it's easy for the guys that got the big contracts and a lot of money in the bank to say that, whereas 3/4 of the league is not in that same situation. They're just hoping to make the team the next year.
Right, and players you run out of money and you stop getting paid, and players start getting in tights. That's what happened in 2010. Players ran out of money and they had to put the pressure on. We got to get a deal done because we got players who are kind of broke and need to get paid here. So I don't see the fully guaranteed contract really being a great argument for the NFL union because they've not argued it well to begin with.
At some point, we're going to get there, though. At some point in my lifetime,
new leadership, I think, is going to have to do that.
At some point in our lifetime, we will see, I think, fully guaranteed contracts for every player that signs a contract.
Maybe, but I think it's not going to be anytime soon. It's not going to be in this discussion. And I don't think even for the 2030 CBA renegotiation. The other thing Goodell talked about was, and he made this comment, I think, during Super Bowl week as well, about the rising costs of stadiums and just the overall expenses teams have. And some have speculated the NFL might try to tweak the revenue sharing percentage in the owners in league's favor. I think that's a hard thing for the NFL to try to do, but of course, there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, you're then what happens to your technically smaller market teams like Green Bay and Pittsburgh and Cincinnati?
Yeah, because these stadiums have become coliseums. I mean, they are just behemoths. I mean, how much do some of these stadiums cost? And there's a whole discussion about taxpayer money, which we're not even going to get into the whole weeds there. I think it's crazy that taxpayers have to foot the bill for all that kind of stuff, but I mean, there are rising costs to simply run a team now.
And look, the owners want more and more revenue because of the rising cost of players and all like that. I mean, you get the crux of the conversation here about circling this all the way back to cash versus cap, though. I mean, we're getting way off. I mean, we could do 3-hour show on this and still not cover it all. Bill Belichick said a couple of years ago, cash spending isn't really that relevant at the time. He says it's cap spending. So teams that spend a lot of cash one year probably don't spend a lot of cash in the next year because you just can't sustain that. So we've had high years, we've had low years, but our cap spending has always been high, and that's the most competitive position you can be in. So that's really the cash spending. There's no cash cap. There's a salary cap, and we spend to the salary cap, and that's what's important. And when pressed on the Patriots' philosophy of not going all in with cash spending, Belichick said such an approach is not sustainable. Temporarily, you can't sustain it. No, I mean, you can't sustain the 20 years of success that we sustain by overspending every year without having to eventually pay those bills and play with a lesser team. So I think if you look at the teams that have done that, that's kind of where some of them ended up. Jacksonville back in 2014, the Rams are going through it. Tampa's going through it now. Not saying there's anything right or wrong with it. It's just a different way of doing things, and there's a result for doing that. Well, even since Belichick made those comments back in 2023, you are now seeing these teams that are trying to because of the use of void years and option years that are trying to get around the repercussions of high cash spending because of cap dollars by pushing out the relativity of future cap dollars versus future cap cap numbers, and allowing them thus to spend more and more cash every year because of that.
Yeah, I'm.
In other words, it's becoming more sustainable to spend more cash above and beyond to try to win. If you got deep enough pockets to do so without suffering the repercussions in a 3 to 5 year span of the cap repercussions because of pushing out the cap amortization further and further.
Agreed, but it's also hoped about the infusion of extra cash, as you mentioned earlier, of outside investors, Tom Brady, Charles Woodson, although Woodson's a little more performative than it is actually, truly financially beneficial. But Brady, I think the reports already paid, and his business partner paid like $7-8 million, and they just paid Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator, $6-7 million, and so that money probably was used to help pay Chip Kelly. And so does this become more the haves and the have-nots, where the teams that have all this infusion of cash get that reflected in the bigger stadiums, the better facilities, the higher paid coaching staff, and the teams that don't have those investors get put in a real disadvantage. I wonder if that's also something to look at, but the NFL just opened up that loophole recently, and I don't know if they're going to close it quickly either.
Now, look, does cash spending necessarily relate to winning? In 2024, the NFLPA says the Browns spent almost $343 million. Okay?
How much of that was on because of Watson?
Right. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously
And
not
Garrett
a clear correlation.
and all like that. And in the same year, they outspent the Steelers in 2024 by nearly $143 million in cash in 2024.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you see the results. So like I said, obviously no correlation there.
Right. But if you do it wisely and it still comes down to how deep of pockets do you want to spend, and are you spending your cash wisely or not?
No, yeah, and who you spend that money on, and yeah, just throwing money does not fix all the problems. In some ways, it can exacerbate problems, which is what's happening in Cleveland right now. I'm just interested in what some of these solutions are, because then we can identify some of the problems. But I'm curious about what the NFL thinks is the right way to try to fix it, and because Goodell really didn't mention that. He outlined some of the issues. He didn't outline some of the solutions.
Look, the Dallas Cowboys supposedly, not supposedly, according to the NFLPA, $353 million in 2024 in cash. And the salary cap was 255.4. So they spent almost nearly $100 million more in cash than the league's cap number in 2024.
And that number is just for the players? That's cash they spent on the players?
That's cash they spent on the players.
Which doesn't consider everything else. How much did it cost to build Jerry's World? The Allegiant Stadium in your neck of the woods was $1.9 billion, by the way.
Right.
Now, some of that was taxpayer funded, and there's a discussion about that. Cowboys was $1.15 billion. So, their actual cash spending was probably double that if you had to probably put a number on it.
All right, so it goes back to people saying, well, the Steelers are cheap. Okay, well, the Steelers still have to spend 90% of the 3-year period cap number in cash, and they do that. Like I said, the last 3-year period, they spent 97% of the league's 3-year cap number in cash. All right, were they outspent by other teams during that same 3-year span? Yeah, absolutely they were. And also, the Steelers are not a team that's trying to technically game the system with the option bonuses and the void years. Now, they obviously did it in the COVID years, but really had no, if they're going to be competitive, they almost had to do that, as did several other teams. But teams learned from that situation that it makes a lot of sense to push out the cap spending as far as possibly can, due to void years and all like that, so we can continue throwing cash. So what the league's worried about is, are you going to considerably see these teams dump more and more cash in their teams and pushing the cap repercussions out to sustain this over a longer period of time?
I just don't know why you just can't. I mean, I know from the union standpoint, but as the NFL standpoint, just make that blanket rule of 5 years proration from the start of the deal, max, no matter what other clauses or void years get thrown in. But to bring it to Pittsburgh, okay, you're right. They don't use void years anymore. Why not? Why is Pittsburgh not using void years and putting themselves at a disadvantage of half the league, and probably larger? More teams are using the void years to gain that benefit.
Well, I would imagine it becomes due to cash flow overall, because if using option bonuses and all like that, you're having to escrow that money and put that money in aside, so it's guaranteed to be there.
And that's where maybe some of the cheap accusations come from, where they're not spending
the actual cash flow aspect of the business.
Yeah, or it becomes where they don't have the money other teams do, and just where you kind of get into that baseball model of the haves and the have-nots, and that's what the NFL may be wanting to address.
Look, I am not an. My math teachers would be proud of me that I do what I do when it
and,
comes to
and a little scared, probably too.
yeah, cap and cash and all like that. I'm well versed on this, but I am not an economics major, and I don't pretend. I don't even do my own taxes. Okay, uh, but it's going to take you know, is going to take a hard look at the economics and aspects of cash flow and escrow and all like that to come up with a better solution for teams not to instill back the integrity of the salary cap system.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, I just to kind of wrap this up, I was really curious on Goodell's point about the rising costs that teams are encumbering in terms of stadium costs, et cetera. And I'm really curious to know what his thought on the solution for that is going to be.
Sure, and then you have the aspect that the Steelers need to spend more on facilities for their players. That's got to come from somewhere, right?
Right. And that's I know we've mentioned this several times over the last couple discussions we've had. That's where I think the accusations of the Steelers and Rooney family being cheap comes from. It's nothing to do about salary cap. It's all about facility. It's all about coaching staff, smaller coaching staff size. I'm going to do my off-season study probably in the next couple of weeks examining that. When fans accuse the Steelers of being cheap, I think that's where it's born out of. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think that's where it comes from, less so about salary cap and cash spending and all those kinds of things.
Should there be a salary cap for coaches and coaching staffs and a cash minimum for that?
Or a cash ceiling for that, some may argue. Yeah. Also, there's been some discussion about should quarterbacks have their own salary cap. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but because quarterbacks are obviously in a whole league of their own when it comes to what they cost relative to other positions. Is there something to be examined for that?
Sure. Now back to and kind of wrap a bow around this because I know once again we get into this cash and cap things and we probably lose half the audience, but it's an important aspect of the business and the team. The reason I'm able to sit here and write posts on cash versus cap and expected cash expenditures in a single year is because the Steelers are one of the more predictable franchises when it comes to such.
In terms of the 90% rule and all that kind of
Well,
stuff?
and yeah, in terms of the way they do extensions, the way they do cash, the way they don't utilize void years, the way they stay away from these rolling option bonuses and all like that, they are one of the. That's why I'm fairly confident in writing and telling people that I expect this team to spend at least 40 to 43 more million in cash this year.
Is that a Rooney thing? This is how we've always done it, so this is how we'll continue to do it thing? Where do you think that philosophy comes from?
I think it is an organizational Art Rooney business perspective, market, team market value, where they sit. And, I think it's lo- short answer is I don't really know the answer to that, but I think based on everything that I said, I think it's just common business practices that the team has organizationally.
I agree. How well do you think Art Rooney II understands the salary cap?
I'm willing to bet he understands it very well.
Okay, that's fair.
I would
think
hope
so.
that I would hope that he does the relation of cash versus cap in spending. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a lawyer. At least that's his background. I don't know if it was in the financial side of things. Obviously you wouldn't expect him to understand it the way Omar Khan, the nitty gritty. But I think the top line, the big picture points, I think he understands pretty well.
All right. So, I just started getting into this cash predicting thing last year or the year before. And what did I say? I was how far off was I last year? Like 2 million or 1 million or
You were
Three
close to the
three
pin.
million. I was pretty damn close. I expect to be pretty. I invite everybody to bookmark this post of what I expect this team to spend in total cash, and then when the report comes out next March from the NFLPA, I expect to be reasonably close. And if I am, I'm going to have a lot of being next year's the third year of the 3-year span, I expect to pretty much nail that one as well too, because we'll have the first 2 years. We'll know what they need to hit as far as either 90% or 90. What I think they're going to try to spend is 97% of the cap and cash again. I ought to be able to lay out the whole offseason for you next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think next year we'll at least know the minimum they have to spend. We'll know their floor, and that should be able to create a pretty easy target range for what they will come in at in 2026.
All right. Shall we get to a couple of questions here?
Yeah, let's get to a couple emails and close out today's show.
All right. Alec George was the one that had the cap question. He says, I have a salary cap question stemming from tweets I saw recently. And this one, the tweet he is referencing is one from Brett Coleman on Twitter. Translation: the league is likely concerned that cash-rich owners use void years and rolling option bonuses to continuously push contracts higher and higher in terms of cash flow, but lower in terms of cap hits, and poor owners can't really replicate that. He asks, could you explain what he means? He says, I don't understand what void years are and why teams choose to do them. All right, Alec, I think we hopefully the long discussion we just had helps sum that up.
Yeah, in like a 2-sentence Cliff Notes version, give a quick summation on void years, just because people might have been lost in kind of all the back and forth we had. What are void years, Dave?
Yeah, void years are years that essentially void, right away after the first year of the traditional contract ends, but because you add those void years to it, look, you can only stretch out the max that you can stretch out signing bonuses is for a 5-year period at max. So if you sign a guy to a 1-year contract and you wanted to give him a $30 million signing bonus, if you added four years of void years onto that contract, that gives you the ability to stretch out that $30 million signing bonus for cap purposes over the 5-year span, and thus $6 million this year, $6 million the next year, $6 million next year, $6 million and that way, even though you know good and well the contract's going to void after the current year. So you still have the $30 million cash that goes out in 2025, but for cap accounting purposes, you're stretching out that $30 million against the cap over a 5-year span.
Yeah, they're fake dummy years that are just used to manipulate the cap. Is that a fair way to sum it up?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
All right, let's Daniel J. McKelvey, tinfoil theories. Hopefully a bit of fun question for you today. Of any of your tinfoil hat conspiracy theories over the years, any of them turn out to be true? And if so, which was the most surprising? Thanks for all you do, Dan from Chicago. Oh man, I've had so many tinfoil hat. I have so many over the years, I imagine that I can't necessarily. I know I've hit some, but in the same breath, I've had some that not hit. I for the life of me, I can't sit here and go. This is one that hit. I should keep more score like that, I suppose. And I know I've hit some. I just can't for the life of me come up with any right away.
Yeah, in terms of the tinfoil, I'm trying to think about your tinfoil hat predictions. I can't think of any specific. For me, this was not necessarily like true tinfoil, but I remember calling in 22 them drafting 2 quarterbacks, Pickett, and I didn't call Pickett, but I said quarterback in the first round, quarterback in the 7th, took a lot of heat for that. And that was because of Pittsburgh. They're speaking of models and things they adhere to, their undrafted free agent structure of drafting a quarterback because they wouldn't be able to sign that guy as a high priority undrafted free agent, and they ended up taking Pickett and Oladokin. So I remember that one getting correct.
I don't know how many times over the years have we said, put your tinfoil hat on for this one. I mean, thousands of them, I would imagine. I'd imagine some, look, some of them, I just can't, in a moment's notice right here, I just can't sit here and recall.
It wasn't probably, I wouldn't call it tinfoil level, but you had that article, was that 2 Christmases ago about don't go buy those George Pickens jerseys because he might not be around for too much longer. That's probably a good example to cite.
Yeah. That might be one there. All right. I think we've got some of the recent questions answered here. We've obviously gone a little long. No live stream tonight on this Memorial Day, right?
Yeah, it wasn't scheduled anyway, but didn't want to do it because of the holiday. We'll be back next Monday.
All right. We got 2 hours out of today. Do you believe that? I do. And once again, I apologize in advance. Hopefully we're helping clear up a lot of this cash versus cap talk and all like that. Obviously, we previewed the OTAs, and if you only listened to the first half of the show, you probably did good on that. So anyway, Alex and I will be back on Wednesday. We'll talk about the first day of OTA practices, who's there, who's not there, if we learned anything, who said what, and everything that goes along with that. We invite everybody to pay attention to SteelersDepot.com over the next several days. Have some good articles already up and coming out over this next week as well too. So until Wednesday, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you have like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. And follow directions that way. So, good talk today, Alex, again. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.